corners, and that means you're putting pressure on them, and it means you're playing the game in their half, in their final third. And if we're really good at that, as well as being really good at corners, it's
be stupid not to marry the two together. You'd be absolutely silly, really.
Of course, and what happens if you're not good at set pieces? You lose games in this day and age. Managers lose jobs and fans lose faith. To me, it's just the most absurd criticism. I think, where there is probably a legitimate discussion to be had is like, how do we stop corners becoming like mud wrestling? WWE.
Mud wrestling, WWE. I saw Man United, Everton. Obviously, Man United did it against us. You got to look at the goal Timber scored. Saliba's being bear hugged. We obviously do it. Everybody's bending the rules as they should. Slot's been crying. Moyes has cried. Carrick's cried. But their teams have all improved at set pieces. Arteta has moaned about it and got better at it. It's a necessary evil in this game.
I agree, but I think there is probably, I don't know how they fix it or what they do. There is probably some discussion to be had about, how players are able to hold each other. And
100%.
It does look at times, it looks a bit more NFL than football, right? Where it's blocking, it's holding, it's obstructing, and it's basically unrefereeable. Because if you look at one player and say, actually, that could be a penalty, there's another player being pulled down by somebody else, or David Raya having his foot stood on by a Chelsea player. You know what I mean?
We would one against us as well.
If you're going to you could give 3 penalties every corner, or you could give 3 free kicks to the defensive team in every corner. So I don't know how they fix it, but the idea that any team should be criticized for scoring more goals from set pieces than anyone else is just, it's absurd to me. It's just sour grapes. I get if people don't like it, if it's aesthetically unpleasing, if it's not the football they grew up with, but this isn't the football you grew up with. The ex-player.
They grew up with, there had to have been an element of scoring from corners. You look at the 1999 final. Man United scored the winner from a corner. Everyone remembers Trent Alexander-Arnold the other day for Liverpool taking it quickly. I don't think people hate corners. They just hate the fact that we're one of the best at them. Nobody really cares about Brentford's long throw. If we were able to do that, which I hope we get that one day, people would have a lot of things to say. And I think unfortunately, that's the way the game is. Like what you said about, the money in the game, the best coaches, everybody's got tactical nous. The margins have gone like that. So you're going to kind of feel like that. By all means, a wider discussion about, is this entertaining? And there probably will be a rule change of some point, even though I think FIFA and them lot have said no. But the game's the game. It's either you bend the rules or adapt, or you keep crying, really. And that goes for every team, including us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think... I think you have to recognize, and listen, we talked about Arseblog being 24. Like, football 24 years ago was really different than football now. Way different. There was a real gulfing quality between the top teams and the rest of the teams that isn't there. Tactically, it was not the same. You played a 4-4-2. Basically, everybody played a 4-4-2, and that was kind of it. Somebody would come in and play 3 at the back, and wing backs, and they would be a defensive team. And I think I said this on one of my own podcasts this week as well, is that football finds a way to react. It always finds a way to react. And the example I used was when Arsenal, maybe post Invincibles, went a little bit more technical, right? Lost some of the physicality, but we brought in these really gifted technical players, Fabregas and Hleb and Rosicki and Wilshere and these kinds of midfielders, right, who would literally pass the ball in triangles around the opposition. They couldn't get near it.
We used to be sick of it.
Well, what was the reaction to that? The reaction to that was Sam Allardyce and Tony Pulis and these traditional English managers deciding that physical long ball football was a way to counter Arsenal, as well as some horrendous on-pitch violence, was a way of countering Arsenal's technical brilliance. If we can't beat them with the ball, we'll beat the shit out of them when they have the ball or when they don't.
And that's even something we've kind of flown over it. The physicality of our players has improved, and their willingness to do that.
Yeah. So, football will always find a way to react. And I think, over the next couple of years, we'll see changes in the game, and we'll look back and say, maybe now you might talk about, how if you kind of really love what might be called in inverted commas the beautiful game, right? Where are the individualists? Everything is so system orientated, everything is so structured, and players have to understand so much about the game, right?
It is like NFL in that regard. You got to remember plays and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. But where are the individuals? Where are the Mavericks? Where are the guys? Your Alexis Sanchez, your Santi Cazorla, you know, these
people that made us fall in love with the game, quote unquote.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think they'll come around again, because what they might become is a really important way of breaking down teams who continue to sit deep. And if you've got somebody who is given maybe a bit of license to express themselves and to be creative, then that might just be the spark that football needs to go back the other direction. But make no mistake, it will. There's always a correction. Some analyst, exactly. They'll find a way and say, is football a bit more boring now? Yeah, can we keep scoring from set pieces? Maybe not. But we'll find a way around it. And that's just how the game goes and has always gone. And, you know, yeah, we'll see what way it goes, but hopefully it's something we can stay on top of.
And that's what we need to, you know, like even with the inverted fullbacks, it's like Pep does that. Now everyone's done that. I won't quite say it's being phased out the game, but it's almost less important. Like even in recent weeks, Arteta's gone back to traditional fullbacks, Pep the same. So it's just swings and roundabouts. And I genuinely think, not like, regardless of what team you support or better yet manage, if I'm Rob Edwards and I can see, you know, there's a new tactic that Pep or Arteta or whatever manager's introducing, I'd be an idiot not to look into it. Now, I might not be able to apply it in the right way. It might not necessarily help me, but you'd be an idiot not to, okay, that works. How can I get ahead of the game? And that's what happens. That's why I always feel this whole Pep's ruined football, Arteta's ruined football, this one's ruined football. How can one individual, one establishment ruin the whole game? If anything, you're thinking one guy's silly, but then the rest of you are following. So who really is? So it is what it is, man. People are just going to be loyal to their agendas. And if I'm completely honest with you, the more that people get mad about specifically Arsenal set pieces, the more I like to see it. Like I can't lie, man. I really get a kick out of it, man. I enjoy being hated, man. Yeah. You got a couple of questions, Andrew, man. Big up the chat. Make sure you're subscribing to Andrew's platform. It is in the title, people. JT has said, do you guys think even though the football was more free-flowing last game, the lack of individual quality could be because I think it means our system didn't utilize it enough over the season?
So the football was more, football more free-flowing last game or last season?
You said last game.
I'm not sure I really understand the question. I'm sorry.
Same. And I don't think we were free-flowing last game against Chelsea, to be fair.
No, and I don't think we were free-flowing last season either, because we had a lot of injuries and there were loads of reasons why you know, we couldn't quite find our rhythm. I mean, maybe the season before.
Yeah, if anything.
But yeah, I'm struggling to understand that question. Apologies to JT 009GV. Sorry about that.
I'm not sure what you're saying there, my guy. What I would say is, you know, at some point, I do think Arteta could give a bit of a license to our attackers. But then, if I'm completely honest, as much as I do that, some of the attackers for the whole totality of this Premier League season, they haven't really cut the mustard. The only thing that's really surprised me with our attackers has been when Trossard kind of had his purple patch, but we've kind of reverted back to type with Trossard, with Martinelli. Obviously, Saka's struggling on the goal front. That's actually a question I wanted to ask you as well. Like, what do you make of Saka? Because I do think some of the games he's playing quite well without necessarily scoring. I don't think he's moving as bad as some would say, but I do want to see some goals. I do think he frustrated me a little bit against Chelsea. I think he was great against Spurs. What have you made of Saka?
I mean, I think he's end product wise, there's a lot of room for improvement, right? Based 100%. On what he's done before, based on what we know he's capable of. I think, you know, the numbers aren't as good as they could be. And I think he'd probably be the first to admit that. Generally, I think he remains really important to us. I think he made 4 key passes against Chelsea. Nobody made more. There were a couple of chances he set up that, you know, maybe we should have done better with. I think there was one very 100%. Early for Zubimendi. I think about, you know, maybe games like the Wolves game at home where essentially it was his corner and his cross that ended up with the 2 own goals. He doesn't get
goals of a great partnership.
Yeah, they don't go on the stats board for him, right? But I think he is still playing reasonably well, but I think he can play better and should play better, and hopefully we get more out of him between now and the end of the season. You know, I think there are goals there that I think if we just sort of uncork him again, if you know what I mean. Just let him. There's a bit of a blockage. You know, we need to give him the medicine, and it all starts flowing again. And hopefully,
and everyone will love him when he starts doing that, man. Like, I mean, I love Saka, innit? I think we got a lot of problems beyond that. Do you know what I would say? Yeah, I do like him in that 10. I did like him in that 10. Well, Odegaard's role. I did like Kai before his injury in that role. That's kind of the different kind of things I wanted to see in isolation from Mikel Arteta, because maybe I'm looking at it too simply, but it just gives opposition something to think about, if I'm honest. And I think people know how we're going to kind of set up, because that's the double-edged sword of what we've been doing that's working. You kind of become an open book. And that's again, if I had to have any criticisms, like my defense, we can improve as a team defensively, but you were right. I've got a couple of questions about my midfield, but generally with my attackers, like we've tried a lot of different individuals in that Odegaard role, and nobody's really grabbed the shirt. Which leads me to ask you as well, before we get to this question by Rob, big up yourself. What have you made of Eze and Gyökeres as well?
I think Eze has been a bit disappointing generally. Like I was so excited by his signing.
We all, man, that was the one.
It was amazing, and obviously he scored that hat trick against Spurs, and he scored the goal against Crystal Palace as well. And you're thinking, yes, you know, this is going to be it, and it just hasn't quite happened for him yet. And I think he is, you know, definitely capable of better. Definitely capable of better. I think what's interesting is that, you know, if we looked at our midfield before, let's say we played with a 6, a deep lying midfielder, and then we played with Declan Rice as the left 8 and Martin Odegaard as the right 8. It feels more this season like we're playing with a double pivot, I guess you would say, with Mendy and Rice, and then Eze is more suited to be a 10 rather than an 8. Plays closer to Gyökeres. I think there's I think we're probably right to expect a bit more from him in terms of consistency. He might get a run in the team now that Odegaard is out. It seems like he might be out for a little while. So yeah, we kind of need him to step up. Gyökeres has been a better, certainly, in the second part of the season.
At the very least.
Yeah, I think he had some really significant issues in adapting and getting up to speed physically and tactically with this team. I think, you know, I say this with respect. I think he is quite a limited footballer. But if you play to his strengths, I don't mean we should just play to his strengths, but if you can
maximize those limitations.
Yeah, exactly. Get him into those positions where we got him into against Spurs, and he's got the strength and he's got the finishing ability. So I think, you know, we're going to have games where he scores goals, and then the next game he'll look clumsy and won't really have a shot, and we'll all be like,
Kai's got to stay fit.
Yeah, what's going on here? You know, so I think he's been better in the second half of the season, and that's good. And I actually hope that improvement can continue between now and the end of the season, because if he can sort of keep that trajectory going that way, then he is on course for a pretty decent goal return at the end of the season. I think he's on.
And maybe he can only get better next year.
And maybe he gets better next year, or maybe we understand him better next year, or maybe he understands the team better next year as well. So I think, you know, they haven't really set the attack on fire in the way that people would have hoped when they signed. But I think they've also played an important role. You know, Gyökeres had to play a lot in the opening part of the season because of that.
Yeah, life came in very quickly.
Yeah, it really did, you know. So I hope, you know, that in these last few months they can really sort of not kick on, but really contribute. So if we're talking in May, if we're sitting here, me and you, at the end of May, and we're trying to assess the signings of last summer, we can say, you know what, took a while, but that was a success.
Yeah.
And I hope that for both of them, you know, because ultimately, if they play well, the team has a better chance of winning, and we have a better chance of winning silverware. So
you mentioned it, yeah, summer signings. Now, what have you made of Hincapié and Mosquera? I only mentioned them because obviously they didn't come in with a lot of like hype around them. Like you said, Eze, he's a Premier League talent. Gyökeres, we all really wanted a striker. Fair enough, Noni didn't set the world alight, but that provided a lot of conversation in itself. I think Mosquera is quite unfortunate that you've got Timber if you are to be a right-back option and the two centre-halves. Bloody good footballer. Hincapie's made that left-back spot his own. And you can see why they were brought. But what have you made of them two?
I think Hincapie has progressed over the course of the last couple of months. I think he's settled in pretty well. I have to say, I mean, I know the questions about the injury are completely valid, but I thought Calafiori, until he picked up that first injury, was excellent.
Yeah, he was one of our players of the season.
I thought he was really, really good. And I do wonder if maybe tonight against Brighton, we might see him come back in. I think Hincapie has been good. Scored a good goal against Wolves. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to win us the game. But, you know, I think that there has been definite progress. Mosquera, every time I see him, I like him. You know, I think
£30 million, ridiculous.
Yeah. You know, I think, again, not to make comparisons with the injuries, but we talked about this on our podcast and sort of likened him a little bit to Tomiyasu in the sense that he can play right back, he can play right centre back, he can play left centre back. I don't really see him playing left back. I mean, we've enough left backs, so that's
overloaded there.
But I think that tactical or that positional versatility is really, really impressive. And every time he's been called on this season, he has looked spot on, you know.
He's had a lot of baptisms of fire, like Bayern Munich, Liverpool. The only time he's been like he's had a game where he could improve, maybe when he was hooked against Newcastle in first half of the season. Great player.
Yeah, really, really good, and he's still so young as well. He's only 20 or 21. You know,
ridiculous.
So a lot of time for him to develop. I think he's been a great signing.
What do you make of Zubamendi? Because I do think, and again, social media isn't the best sort of sample size, but I like Zubamendi. I think he's done very well. He'd probably be out of the new signings the one for me. I know it's all relative because Mosquera's exceeded in expectations, but I did look at Eze, Gyökeres, and Zubi as you lot are like the main guys, like the game changers. Like with Zubamendi, we've chased you for so long. You've got your first choice pivot in Arteta's mind with him and Rice. Gyökeres, fair enough. We know the hype around the striker, and Eze's just Eze, innit? You can never have too many of those. I do think Zubamendi is. It's not that he's struggling, but he's playing a lot of games. He is looking knackered. I am kind of nervous about generally our midfield options. I know we've got Norgard. I know Kai's fit. I know you've got the option of Miles Lewis-Skelly. And I know there's a couple little tweaks if need be that Arteta could do. But yeah, what have you made of Zubamendi?
I think, you know, until the last month, he would have been, you know, unquestionably up there with the signing of the season.
Yeah, last month's been horrible for him, really.
And there's a very good reason. Nobody's played more minutes than Martin Zubamendi. No player in the Premier League has run further than Martin Zubamendi. So not a single player on any other team has made more or run as far in terms of total kilometers than Martin Zubamendi. Remember as well, in Spain, he would have been used to a winter break. I know it's only a couple of weeks, but it still makes
a difference.
Because what do you do in that period in England? You play a ton of games, you know, when typically he would have had a rest. So I think you have to, if you're trying to assess Zubamendi, you can say his recent form has not been as good as it should have been. And maybe we'd like to see a bit more from him in terms of helping us control games. But I think you also have to acknowledge that there are reasons for that. It's not because his quality is like, he didn't just have a purple patch. I think what we saw in the first 6 months of the season was the real Zubamendi. There were a couple of mistakes in there, not great mistakes. Okay, that can happen to the best players. It can happen. But I think generally speaking, we saw who Martin Zubamendi is in the opening 6 months of the season. And now we're seeing a Martin Zubamendi who is running on fumes a little bit. And we don't have the options with no Marino, no Odegaard.
Kai, we kind of have to play a cute game with him being fit.
Know, so I do think that if people are being critical of Zubamendi's form of late, I understand it, but don't ignore why. That would be the only thing I'd say.
And I would say the only thing I would say with Zubi is something like, I'm not necessarily, it's going to sound dumb, but I'm comfortable with him against City, for example. When it's like a typical chess match, you know, Arteta versus Pep, I think that's your bag. When it's the typical British games where it's end to end, it's kind of crazy. Sunderland away, Aston Villa away. I think that's where Zubi struggled. And I think that's that's just something you had to go through. I know people must have told these players about the Premier League. He knows it himself. But I think when you're there living and breathing it, that's when you're like you said, with his mistakes, on one hand, it does happen with those kind of players, but you can hold that. But the positives far outweigh the negatives. The only thing with me is, like you said, he's played a lot of games. Rice the same. I'm a bit concerned about our midfield, if that makes sense, which leads me to ask you, like, what do you make of Norgard's lack of being used? Because I'm not one of them fans. I always have a bit of pushback on my channel. I don't quite subscribe to he should have way more starts. Granted, there's a start here or there for him. Where I do agree with people is the substitute appearances, kind of like how he came on against Chelsea. But where are you at with Norgard, man? Did you think he'd play a lot more of a role, or is this kind of what you expected?
I didn't think he'd play a lot more in Premier League terms. I thought he would have more minutes.
Yeah,
maybe exactly. A few starts here and there. But I've found it hard to square the circle of, like, if we don't have a great game, that somehow using Christian Norgard would have been the thing to make it better. I mean, I think what you would say, going back to my previous point, is maybe Zubimendi is not as knackered right now if Norgard had played a few more minutes in other games. Maybe. I think the fact that we've also had quite a lot of tight games means that Arteta has sort of erred on the side of caution, and tried to keep the structure on the pitch as much as possible. If you've got Rice and Zubimendi on the pitch, like, who do you take off there for Norgard? It wasn't his moments at Chelsea. Yeah, like, it wasn't his fault against Chelsea, right? Because collectively against 10 men, we were not great. But he came on, and in 20 minutes, he made 2 passes. When he came on, I was like, okay, this is good. Experienced player. It's a shame Rice has to go off. Got an experienced Premier League and international player. Put your foot on the ball. Make 20 passes. Just keep the ball circulating. Keep the ball away from just calm. Like I said, it's not entirely his fault, because I think collectively there was a wider issue. But things like that just sort of give me pause for thought, that if that's what's happened there, maybe that explains to some extent Mikel Arteta's reluctance to use him or depend on him in key moments. So I don't think it's the biggest issue we have this season, and I think there'll probably be minutes for him to play between now and the end of the season. And you just never know with players. Someone can step up and become a bit of a hero in the final part of the season, and you don't expect them to be. I don't necessarily think it's going to be him, but I'm not that surprised that his role has been quite peripheral, to be honest.
Let me be devil's advocate. Like, do you think Arteta trusts him? Do you think Arteta trusts all of his squad? Like, we know, as much as people say it's a squad game and many people have contributed and done well, I don't think this is crime. There naturally is hierarchies, not just with Arteta, with everybody else. Like, he's got his own ethos and things. But do you think he fully trusts Norgard? Do you think he fully trusts his squad? Because we are getting into that point of the season where everyone's got a part to play.
I don't know. It's too difficult for me to say. If he did because we're not absolutely implicitly trust him, he probably would have played a bit more. So do we read into the fact that he hasn't played that there's some issue there? I'm not sure it's a personal issue or anything like that. But, remember as well, it took Declan. How many times did you hear Declan Rice say, God almighty, there's a lot to learn.
There's a lot
when
to
you come to Arsenal, you've got to learn this, that, and the other.
It's a culture shock.
Yeah, maybe Norgard has taken more time than you would expect to get up to speed with that kind of stuff. I'm not sure. I just think that there is, with all due respect to him, quite a gap between, let's say, him and Zubimendi or him and Declan Rice.
Even the man who's technically replaced in part in the summer.
Exactly. And I'm not sure that gap is quite as big anywhere else in the squad. Even, let's say, between Raya and Kepa, I don't think it's that big. Looking at other positions, Gyökeres and Jesus, flip a coin on that one. Martinelli, Trossard, Saka, I think is better than Madueke, but the Madueke gap is not as big. So I think it's maybe the only area of the pitch where the gap between first choice and backup and squad player is is maybe bigger than you would like it to be.
Definitely need to buy a midfielder in the summer. That and a left winger has to be top of Berta's agenda or feature quite prominently on the recruitment list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not ready for a summer transfer chat yet, man.
Neither am I. Like right now, we're engulfed in the season and ingrained in the season. A bit of a different question. Rob, I apologize for leaving your question up there for so long. Andrew, when you look back on 24 years, what stands out as highlights for you in brackets and with James in doing a blog/channel? Thank you for your work. Been following you forever.
Thank you, Rob. I get, for me, it would always be the things that involve the community, for want of a better word, the Arsenal fan community, you know. So when we do live events, live podcasts, where you get all those people in a room and you can sort of share an evening with them and chat afterwards and all of those kinds of things, you know, is amazing. You know, that sort of, you might get, if you spend a lot of time online, an idea about people that isn't necessarily representative of most people, right? You know, the way people interact in real life is not how people interact online.
1,000,000%.
People will say, and they might get bored of saying, go outside, touch grass, all that kind of stuff. But there's truth to that. And when you know, go outside, touch grass, sit down and talk to a normal person. Right. And I think for me, you know, whether it's in London or Dublin, or, you know, I've been lucky enough to go to many great places in the world and do events and meet Arsenal fans from all over the world, to see that the love and the passion for the club is the same, whether you're walking down the Holloway Road or whether you're walking down Fifth Avenue or whether you're walking down wherever it is in Australia or Asia. The passion and the support for the club is unparalleled. It's
crazy wherever you are in the world.
It's brilliant. And that for me, I think, is, you know, the most amazing thing, you know, is to be able to connect with fans and you know, be fortunate enough to be able to go and do that as well. You know, that the blog and the podcast has given me the platform, if you like, to be able to go and do those things, you know. So it's amazing. Yeah.
It's heartwarming, and that's what football's about. Like, you know, again, even the negativity and the people that need to touch grass is one thing, but even the positive messages, I'm sure you get on your blog and your channels and what